Back to basics. Why do we carry hollow points for defensive handgun ammunition? It's a general rule of thumb. You carry hollow points, right? But why is that? Maybe some people don't actually know the why. They're just told to, so they do it. I'm going to explain that why today in a back to basics episode. I did a back to basics yesterday on bug out bags, and I thought that's not a bad idea to go back to the basics and explain things. So today let's do that with defensive ammunition. Why do we use hollow points? Welcome to the podcast. We talk about guns, gunfighting, tactics, ballistics, the right way with God Almighty at the center. Biblical Judeo-Christian values and real-world first-hand experience. On that, bio bullet points in the show notes. Military, law enforcement, private security, contracting, competition shooting, firearms instructor, hunter, a lot of other stuff in there that God has blessed me to be able to do and live through. So that now hopefully I can share the experiences and knowledge with you guys. Blessed be the Lord my rock, who trains my hands for war and fingers for battle. Okay, so let's look at this critically. Let's get into some philosophy and some engineering, some physics. I know deep topics for a simple gun podcast, but they're important. This is an important subject. This is going to start off with a short diversion on why carry handguns, right? Handguns, and I love handguns. I've won more competitions with a handgun than any other platform. I carry a handgun day to day, both personally and professionally. And I love the handgun. That said, handguns are horrible fight-stopping tools compared to long guns, whether you're talking a shotgun or you're talking a rifle. They are not good. And the goal of shooting somebody generally is not to kill them, especially for a civilian defensive use. That's not your goal. Your goal is to take them out of the fight. But the statistics I have are that if we take them as true, is that something like 80% of handgun shots are not fatal. That's not great numbers there. Why do we carry them then? Well, because it's convenient. That's why we carry a handgun, because we can have it on our person concealed or on our duty belt, and we can carry it all day for decades. If we actually think we're going to get into a fight, we're going to carry a rifle, right? The U.S. military, or any military, any military in the world, they don't arm their mainline infantry, their main fighting troops, with just handguns. They arm them with a long gun, usually a rifle, an assault rifle, or a main battle rifle, or a machine gun. Right? They don't arm them with just handguns. Handguns is a backup tool. That should prove the case right there. Right? A cop, his handgun is a defensive weapon. If he's going in hot, then he's going to grab his shotgun out of the center console, or maybe a patrol carbine. But I think I can say this because I was a cop for quite a while. Cops are not gunfighters. Some cops are, but most cops are administrators. They're clerks. Ask a cop how much time he spends writing a report, either on a keyboard or with a pen and pencil, whatever it is, writing tickets, how much time they spend writing documents or reviewing documents versus how much time they spend at the gun range or shooting or in firefights. They're administrators that happen to carry a gun. And it'd be pretty unwieldy to do the majority of their job carrying a rifle around. It just would not be feasible. That's why they carry handguns, because it's convenient. That's why we carry handguns, because they're convenient. We can have them on us. They are not, again, great stopping tools. I don't care what. Let's not get into the caliber warrior discussion. That's why you got to carry a 45. But you don't, and the numbers don't bear out that they do any better. If you talk about actual modern ammunition and real world studies, there's no evidence for that. It's just because you want it to be true because it's in a movie or something. But any defensive handgun round is inherently ineffective compared to shotgun, compared to a full payload, a double buck, compared to even an intermediate, fairly puny as far as rifle rounds go, 5.56 or 223. They're even woefully inept compared to those. We have them because they're convenient. Okay, with that said, in an effort to make them slightly more effective, we use hollow point ammunition. And not everybody does, right? The military largely uses Full Metal Jacket. Why do they do this? Because of the Hague Convention of the 1890s, which we didn't sign, but we, I guess, figure it's a good idea. That's kind of the surface reason we do it. Another reason I suspect is money. And you may not want to hear this, but the military doesn't always get the best equipment. They get affordable equipment. They get the, stuff priced to the lowest bidder most of the time. And you're talking about quantity has a quality all its own. It costs a lot less to make Full Metal Jacket ammunition than good expanding hollow point ammunition. And again, for the vast majority of the military, the handgun's a backup tool. So things have gone horribly wrong. As somebody that's carried a handgun in combat and in war, if you get to your handgun, things have gotten really bad. And at that point, I don't think they're super concerned about giving you the best. They're just giving you something. And for rifle and handgun ammunition, most of the time, they're going to give you what's easy to mass produce. So, Full Metal Jacket. You're not bound by that, right? As far as I know, you did not sign the Hague Convention in the 1890s, nor did I. So we can make handgun ammunition a little bit more effective. And we're not buying, unless you've got a way bigger budget than me, you're not buying, purchase orders of ammo in the tens of millions. You're buying a few magazines, a few boxes of defensive hollow point ammunition. So although it is expensive, it's way less of a concern when you're trying to talk about budgets. You're talking about buying a box or two of defensive ammunition, not, tens of millions of rounds. Okay, so how does this work? Well, your general hollow point ammunition, or your general Full Metal Jacket ammunition, even out of a handgun, common rounds, 45, 9mm, they're going to penetrate fairly deeply because if we get to the physics, a good formula for penetration is a fairly high sectional density chunk of lead moving at moderate velocities. If you go at very high velocities, like a rifle, a lot of times the projectile can come apart and fragment, which causes less penetration. So a handgun moving at moderate velocity, say around the speed of sound. I know some are subsonic and some go, 1,200 feet a second, depending on if you're talking 115 grain or 147 grain. But either way, it's a fairly moderate velocity that it's chugging along at. In a Full Metal Jacket, usually not enough in a defensive kind of target to make it lose integrity and come apart. So you're going to get a lot more penetration than you need or want. Even if we take the, over-penetration, innocent bystanders thing out of the equation, you're zipping through there and you're getting a lot more penetration than you need or want. So in an effort to mitigate that and do more damage in the target, you want the projectile to expand. Because most of a human body is water, and water doesn't compress. When you hit it with a projectile, it will want to expand that projectile if it has a hollow point on it. So the projectile should want to expand and open up. Like a mushroom, like a flower, you get the idea. That's kind of the core of this. We get down to the physics again. When the diameter of that projectile increases, its ability to penetrate decreases because it's got a larger surface area. If we take an arrow, just so you can kind of picture this in a different way, if you take an arrow that weighs the same, two arrows that weigh the same, and the arrow heads weigh the same, you take a field point, like just a regular pointy, if you can just think of a pointy cone at the end of that arrow, and you shoot it into something, it's going to penetrate very deeply, even if the arrowhead itself weighs, let's say, 100 grains. If you take that same 100 grains, you make it a blunt, wide tip like you would use for shooting a bird, you're going to get way less penetration, even if it's the same weight arrow traveling at the same velocity, hitting at the same amount of energy. It's going to penetrate far less because it has a wider diameter at the front of the projectile. That's why you would use that on a bird. You don't want massive penetration on a small bird with an arrow. Well, getting back to the hollow point, that's what happens with the hollow point. When it enters, it starts to expand, and the greater the circumference or the diameter of that projectile gets in the front, the less it's going to penetrate. And there has been a great deal of research and development in hollow points in the past, especially the past 20 years, to get this just right for different calibers, for different loads, for different grain weights. You'll often notice, even if it's the same manufacturer, like the hollow point, the actual dimensions of it will be different on 115 grain versus 147 grain. Like the shape of the hollow point itself will be different because, again, you want to balance those two, how much it expands without expanding too much. If it expands too much, and you will not get enough penetration, you will not reach vital organs, central nervous system, penetrate bones, which, were designed to help stop horrible things from getting into our organs. So you need enough penetration to get to where it needs to go, but you want expansion so that it does not over penetrate and just go through doing minimal tissue damage. Because obviously the other part of this is the larger the front of that bullet, the more tissue it's going to disrupt. The more tissue it disrupts, the greater chance it's going to have to stop that person from doing that bad behavior that made you shoot them in the first place. And this is really the crux of the matter of why we carry hollow points in a handgun, because handguns are generally not that effective anyway. To increase their effectiveness, we take some of that extra penetration that we don't need and we turn it into expansion, and we maximize the amount of tissue disruption inside the target. And that is kind of why we carry hollow point defensive ammunition. Generally, most of the time. Why would this not be the case again? If you're in the military, also if you're carrying a very small caliber that you aren't going to get as much penetration. Very small, often referred to as like a mouse caliber. Like if you're carrying a 25 ACP, I'm not advising you do this, but if you're carrying a 25 ACP, you could make the argument you don't really need a hollow point because you're not going to get massive penetration anyway. And if it expands, it may not penetrate deep enough because you're just not working with a lot of power. Where is that line? I would put 32 ACP in that line, and I would put 380 is right straddling the border of whether you want hollow points or full metal jackets. A decade ago, I would have said probably makes a lot of sense to carry a full metal jacket and a 380. Today, with the rise of concealed carry in America, there's been a lot more R&D into the 380, and there are some decent expanding loads for the 380. So again, that's a fence straddler there. If you had done your research, not just you bought some and just carried it because it was cheap, but you did your research on your gun, your barrel length, and your intended target, your climate, clothing you're going to encounter, things like that, and you decided to carry full metal jacket in 380, I wouldn't call you a fool. I would not. I would say good for doing your research. If you were carrying 380 and you decided to go with a good, modern expanding hollow point, I would say good for you doing your research. So again, a fence straddler. Other reasons, bear defense was one that comes to mind, right? If you're using a handgun, unless you're using a massive handgun, I'm talking about like 500 Smith & Wesson at that point, it's basically a handgun in name only because they're not super practical to carry or use. But we're talking common handgun calibers, right? And let's not get into the caliber warrior debate here. You could make the argument for bear defense. You don't want expansion because you want maximum penetration in a straight line because you don't know at what angle you're going to be shooting that bear. You don't know what kind of bones you're going to have to get through. Bears can be quite a bit beefier and more robust, not to mention really thick hide and fat on a bear. So you might want to opt for more penetration. So you might want like a hard cast bullet that doesn't expand for something like that. And those are fairly common in that arena. So those are some outliers. But in general, again, you want to maximize the effectiveness of your handgun, both for you to save your life, save other people's lives, and, to have the maximum effect on target. You want to balance that penetration versus expansion because that's diametrically opposed things. You got to balance them to get the best, which is why we carry hollow points for defensive use, and which is why you should spend more than a passing glance at what load you carry on your hip to save your life and other people's lives. It's something to do some research on, not because of the marketing hype, not because it's got catchy words like maximum or, I don't know, ripper, smasher, advanced, like just game changer. Those are kind of red flags to me. But a good proven load that has street cred, that has been around a while, that's been tested, that has some decent amount of adoption, so you know that it works. You're not going to be the beta tester in a gunfight, but do more than just a passing glance on what you actually have on your gun on your hip. But I thought it would be a good back to basics episode on why. Like, why do we actually carry hollow points? Because, I didn't pop out of my mom's womb with a duty belt on, with a gun belt on. I had to learn all this stuff, and people are getting into shooting all the time. People are getting into preparedness, wanting to be able to protect themselves, their family, society, their tribe. I applaud that. That's something we should be doing, and we should invite new people in all the time. And they don't just know this. You weren't born just knowing this information. So you have to remember that you and I and everybody else that knows this, we learned it, and new people are coming in all the time. If you did already know this, then maybe share it with somebody you think it would benefit. Help me help the community. Share this with somebody you think would benefit from it. This is a good episode to share to somebody getting into guns, getting into concealed carry, which will bring me to the tactical verse of the day. I'm sure I've used it many times, but it's a classic from Jesus Christ. Let he who has no sword sell his cloak and buy one. Thanks for listening, and have a blessed day.